Mm.
Peace, everybody. Welcome to another episode of On Tilt. Miss Danielle, how you doing?
Hey, I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging there. I have good days and not so good days.
Mm,
This is not the best day, but I'm here.
you are. Yes. Yes, you have a smile on your face,
Oh.
you know. So, before we get into it, like we always do with our the start of our On Tilt episodes, we want to make sure that we take a moment and just reflect in silence for folks who are no longer with us and just give them their proper respect. So just please join us in a moment of silence. I was going to let you take as much time as you needed. So we have I think today the conversation that we have today is so important. Every week we have a really significant, meaningful conversation. And today, I think it's so important to build off of last week's conversation. Where we started to talk about trauma a little bit, and you see the title there, understanding the impact of trauma. So we had a lot of folks over these past few weeks who have been really engaged and asking questions and sharing their feedback and expertise. And we have a guest who's with us today, who's going to help us navigate this. But before we bring him on, Miss Danielle, I do want to just give you a chance to talk about when you think about understanding the impact of trauma in your own personal and professional journey and travels. What does that mean to you?
Mhm. Well, as many of the viewers and the audience know, is that I'm in the midst of a trauma, navigating it as we speak. Um, I shared earlier off the screen that sorry, let me turn this down. Sorry. Uh, I usually have that off. That's a traumatic experience. But I shared with you all that you know, I'm on a hunger strike, and my father had said something to me. He said, I talked to my doctor, and I told my doctor that I need to do what my daughter do and be on a liquid diet. And so I said to my father, I said, Dad, what are you saying? What are you talking about? I said, so you're telling me that you're going to do what I do. So you're going to eat fresh grapefruit, no protein, no veggies, no smoothies, no fruit smoothies. You're going to abstain from any type of nourishment at all. And you call that a liquid diet. And then he started thinking about it. He was like, wait a minute, no smoothies, no veggies, no nothing. No, Dad. You can have grapefruit because grapefruit has a key ingredient that supports your mental stability. But even that is not much. It has, and so long story short, I think a light bulb went off. And I realized at that time that maybe I need to be a little bit more outgoing with the trauma that I experience right now, being on a hunger strike, whereas the headaches, the migraines, the fatigue, the body aches, not knowing what's going on in my system, the delayed in speech, the connectivity of mental and audible. So it's not it's a form of activism, but it's not something that anyone should enter into. And there's traumas that come out of this. And that is, I've had to deal with ridicule, people asking about your child, my child, about Jamal, about, just my family. And hunger strikes a form of activism. It's the form I chose. And it's very traumatic, I understand, for myself and for others.
Mm. Well, first off, Miss Danielle, I just want to just thank you and honor you and acknowledge everything you just shared. Because as you were starting to speak to, I don't know if people fully understand, or for that matter, appreciate the depth of of what this means to you and your commitment to it and how it's impacting you. So I just want to acknowledge and honor you for being open and brave and courageous, because it's not and transparent. It's not easy to do that, to share uh, candidly the traumas that we've gone through. So to, excuse me, transition into bringing on our guests today, we really want to explore, as the title said a little bit earlier, and we'll bring that back up, understanding the impact of trauma. I'm in this space, Miss Danielle, you and I have spoken about this before, where our connectivity to our spirit and to a higher being, and just knowing that we have a purpose that's so much bigger than us and so much bigger than our families and our circles, and we just know that it's connected to something divine. And so, I've been on over the past maybe few days. I don't know if you saw, I recently been posting on social media, just kind of like meditation, mindfulness
Mhm.
kind of things. And I it appears, right, like it's this, oh, he's on like a positive kick, right? He's in his meditation yoga bag, but it was birthed out of me feeling like I didn't know what to do with the amount of stress and anxiety and trauma that I was experiencing, right? It was like I literally got to a point where I was like, if I don't change something right now for me, I'm afraid of what the next day or the next second is going to bring for me, right? So I had to, and it's a struggle every day. I'm listening to my meditations. I'm reflecting more on my trauma, and I try to tell myself every day that I am not my trauma. Like, even though it's an experience, I try to, like, you know put it on the outside. That's very, very difficult to do. It's not an easy thing to do. So again, I'm grateful to be on this journey with you, and you and I were kindred spirits. So without further ado, we're going to bring on a specialist, a
Yeah.
gentleman who has a very, very deep appreciation and understanding about trauma, its impact in our lives, how to navigate these conversations in the community with people when we're thinking about trauma at not just the individual level, but at a collective level, and how we can come up with some solutions. So, without further ado, we're going to bring on Darnell Drewery to join the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, brother, welcome. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you? It's a blessing to be here. Thank you all for having me on here.
Man.
Absolutely. We're grateful. We're grateful for you. So, I try to do my best of giving just a little bit of background about folks, but I know I certainly didn't do it justice. So, if you can just tell us a little bit about, who you are, what's important to you, what brought you to the work, I think that would be good for people to hear.
Sure. I am a community intervention specialist over at a Center for Victims, and I'm also a facilitator and trainer for the Center for Victims Healing Rivers Project, where I focus most of my attention on understanding the impact of trauma, as well as the Christian chaplain for South Pittsburgh Coalition for Peace and the South Pittsburgh Peacemakers in the South Side. And and with all of the things that I can run down, as I am the co-founder for the Shine Awards Foundation, along with my wife, and I'm also the morning show personality for the Anthony Drew Morning Show on WXCN Power Radio. All of those things and many things that I often tell people. I can go on and on about all of the accolades and all of, but for me as a Christian, personally, I say the best thing that I've ever done is personally is build a relationship with Jesus Christ. That's my best, and that's the greatest accolade that I can present for people individually. For myself, as far as a resume is concerned, that is the most important thing for me. So,
Thank you, brother. I was just coming off mute there. Thank you for that intro. So, we want to jump right into it and not waste any time. We prepared some questions for you. And I believe the first question we have, I want to say, Miss Danielle, that you may have been the sole creator of this question, so I don't want to steal your thunder.
All right, you ready?
Oh, absolutely, I'm ready.
All right. First of all, thank you. Let me just say thank you for joining us, because a lot of us have trauma, and the reality is that for some of us, we don't even know what our traumas are. We're acting out things that we are so unfamiliar with. And, it's not until we enter into some type of therapy that sometimes we start to unravel sometimes the reason why we do what we do, and why we think the way we think. And a lot of time it's rooted in some type of maybe earlier traumas, current traumas, but it's rooted a lot of times in trauma. So thank you. Thank you for joining us and helping us to understand better our traumas in life. And more importantly, that we're not crazy. Everybody, if you live long enough, will have a traumatic experience.
Sure.
All right, my first question is, why in the Black community are we exposed to flight or fight choices as the predominant option? Has one of these responses gotten us killed more often than not?
Thank you for that question. And I just want to, prior to that question, recognize some of the things that you were saying earlier. That in response to individuals, we have to know that trauma is an individual thing. It's not about the event; it's about the individual. So trauma is individual. That's number one, and therefore we can take individual approaches. So the approach or the journey that we may take someone on is not necessarily a collective journey. We have to understand it from an individual perspective. And with that said, this fight, flight, and or freeze, we also say fight, flight, or freeze, are the normal responses. These are just not Black responses, but these are the normal responses of the brain and body's basic response to trauma. So the primitive part of the brain, when trauma happens, the primitive part of the brain responds with that fight, flight, or freeze response. And it is a response. And I would say normally that fight or flight kicks in. And why we turn to that choice has everything to do with how the brain has gotten familiar with responding to trauma. If the brain is familiar with going down that path, the brain will continue to go down that path no matter what the incident or the event is. And therefore it creates this indelible path, this path that it is used to going down, unless, because there is neuroplasticity to the brain. So the brain is capable of being redirected in a new path. And so it needs new experiences and some fresher experiences to create a new path to go down. Therefore, oftentimes we go down this path of fight or flight because it's the path that has been created for us. Oftentimes we create this path through our conversations. We pass down this path is passed down through not only conversations, but even through our DNA. There's an intergenerational trauma. This is how we respond to things, and those things are even passed down in the expression of our DNA through our parents. How our parents have handled things. This began to happen even in utero. that the mother is constantly going through trauma. If a child is being birthed in utero, the mother's going through trauma. She's even passing down this kind of expression through her own DNA, and that expression can come out even as we are born into this type of environment. And so that expression of fight flight is usually something that's passed down, and it becomes the indelible path that is created in the brain.
Yeah. In the second part of that, I was thinking as you were talking, I was thinking about, how often, when we're stopped by officers or law enforcement, we literally had to teach our children what to do under those circumstances. Pretty much all of us had to be educated in the last several years on what to do in those situations, because we have seen that a lot will choose flight as their means of escape because of what we have seen, like you said, because of the traumas, because what we know has happened to us generational when we come in contact with the legal system.
Yeah, and you know what? This fight, flight, or freeze, there is no right or wrong way to do this. It's the response, and so we often try to domesticate ourselves on what response should I go with. And this response is an automatic response. We don't, but then we learn ways to control that automatic response, how to calm ourselves down, and we go through some of the processes that we have to go through in our brain and body to make connection to address what our brain might be telling us to do. If my brain is telling me to fight, I may need to know some tools or know some self-care tools to calm that idea down, that me fighting could put me in deeper trouble, or me flighting could put me in deeper trouble, or even me freezing. So sometimes our brain will say, do this, and the cognition is not working, but we constantly go through some self-care strategies to try to avoid those deeper reactions from other people. So a lot of times it's not so much the lack of someone who is going through a traumatic experience. It's not through the lack of their ability to respond. It's oftentimes the lack of the ability to the persons who responding to them. It's their lack of ability and education. If a police officer is coming up on someone in a traumatized state, they should have the ability to understand, is this trauma, and we have created institutions to look through one or two lenses. Society have created institutions over the years. We only look through the lenses of crazy or criminal, and so there's institutions that are built. Oh, is this person crazy or is this person criminal? We don't often look through the lens of trauma. And the lens of trauma puts us in a very different space to recognize that this person is traumatized. There's something that has happened to this person. There's nothing wrong with this person. Something happened to this person. And so my empathetic response would be different if I understand something happened to you versus something is wrong with you. But criminal or crazy lens says something is wrong with you, and I need to address that wrong. And we build institutions for criminal or crazy lenses. And, of course, we know there's institutions for people that are criminal. And we also have institutions that were built for people that we consider crazy. There's mental health in the penal system. And that's the harsh reality of what we're faced with, why it's so important for us to have an understanding of trauma, and especially as providers, have an understanding of trauma. If I walked up to someone in trauma as a responder, it's the indictment on myself, not on the person who was traumatized. The indictment is on me. So.
Thank you for that. What I'm taking away from this, a piece I want to pull out, Darnell, that you said that's important, is that even though it's oftentimes an automatic response,
Sure.
is a moment or can be a moment, right? If someone is competent and operating in their right frame of mind, there is an opportunity to think about, okay, I want to, there's fight, flight, or freeze coming up for me. but I can also still come back and reflect on how do I want to handle this, or how do I want to approach this, or how do I want to respond, even in the midst of that automatic fight, flight, or freeze. Is
Sure.
that what I heard you say?
And yeah, that's absolute. And that is something we're not trying to do when we're in trauma. That's something that we have to do as a regular practice, as an everyday practice to say, let me make these things an autonomic response, because we have what is called the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is the brain and body connection, and how the body will respond to stress or trauma. And so these are the things that the body automatically does. And so therefore, if something traumatizing happens, my body will go automatically, my body will go into a response where there's dilated pupils, the heart beats faster, all of those things, the type of things that happen within our stomach, our heart rate goes, which means our blood is pumping faster through our body. But there are stress relieving activities that we can begin to put into our life through, meditation or whatever the self-care activities that we put into our life to kind of address these things. And those are things that are often the things that can help control that autonomic response, those things that are automatic, and therefore doesn't say it takes away the response. It says that it addressed the response, so it doesn't take away the nervousness. It doesn't take away the fight, flight, or freeze. But what it does, it address it. It'll recognize it and address it in one way or another. And so this is something that you want to. This is why we have to add this to our daily living, meditation and prayer and whatever those things are, deep breathing, all those things that address these type of automatic responses in the autonomic nervous system. And so, yeah, and those are things that can bring a little bit of sense and sensibility to our response. Because in trauma, we don't have that cognition is not there when the signal from the brain is sent to the amygdala, which is the alarm system that tells you just to save yourself. When you go into that save yourself alarm system, you're just going to fight, flight, or freeze. Your body is going to do it without you thinking about it. There's no cognition there. It's just going to happen.
Thank you for that. And then I think that's a good segue for us to move into our second question here. We want to bring that on the screen. So, and Ms. Danielle, I believe this was your question too. I'm really trying to be mindful, not stealing your thunder.
Where's Julia's question? I know you got some good ones, Julia. But this one is mine too. Okay. What should first responders do when faced with a person who is delusional, crisis? How do you keep them safe from harm without using weapons, but using protective force if need be? Like you have to use some type of force.
Sure.
Because, but how do you keep them protective without you killing them? I guess that's the better question.
And you know what? This is a great question. And I say that because as we were moving into the answer to this question, this goes again, towards the education and the indictment on the responder, not on the person you're responding to. If someone is in crisis, you can't expect them to do anything in a very cognitive manner. And so therefore, if you're the responder, we need you to have that higher thinking intact. And therefore, knowing what type of force am I bringing to the situation? Therefore, if you coming up on someone who is in a traumatic situation or a crisis, you're not approaching them with a really fast and with a really fast approach. You're trying to make sure not to diminish, but to shrink yourself in a way, whether it's vocal, verbal, physical, all of those things is trying to shrink that for that person. Because all that person is seeing as they in a traumatic state, all they're seeing is incoming traffic as harm to them. And they're going to respond to the incoming traffic as harm. And then they're going to respond accordingly to aggressive incoming traffic. And our natural response as human beings is fight, flight, or freeze. you know, and these responses are necessary. And therefore, if I'm in the woods and I'm being chased by a bear, I got to think fight, flight, or freeze. But if I'm in the middle of a classroom and I still feel like my teacher feels like the bear, I gotta, figure out some ways to calm down because the teacher's not a bear. I'm no longer in that fight, flight, or freeze moment, or a police officer approaching me. So this question is really about the responder, and the responder's educates need for education, and then a responder paying much attention to themselves. How am I making this situation worse? Am I making this situation worse? Is my voice too loud for this person? Does my voice remind me of the trauma that this person is going through? I remember one time I had a little bit of ongoing conflict with a young man I was working with, and for a while I was working with him, and I couldn't understand why I just couldn't get through to him. And oftentimes the words that I would use, he eventually said, "Well, you remind me of my father." And then for me, I used to laugh at that. I used to just kind of snicker. I was like, and the only reason why I laughed at that or snickered at that, because I had a good experience with my father, not knowing that he didn't. So I'm approaching him from the my father approach. I'm thinking my father means something good. My father means something great. But for him, my father meant something harmful, something scary. And so then I had to recognize that as a responder, and had to understand from his perspective what did my father mean for him. And therefore, I had to watch the language that I use. I had to watch the tone of voice that I use. I had to watch the way that I approach this young man. And so sometimes this particular question is about the responder and not so much about the person going through the crisis.
Yeah, as you know, this is a very touchy situation for me because my son was experiencing a crisis, and from what I understand, and I've shared before that I've dealt with crisis individual. I have a master's in counseling psychology. I've worked with individuals in crisis, so I have a background in it. But I know that the number one priority is to keep a person safe. And when you arrive on the scene, you're right. The responder is the most influential, important person that dictates that outcome. And especially when you're dealing with an unarmed individual,
Absolutely.
it's my belief that you keep that person safe. You don't let them near knives and the kitchen where they can pick up a knife and harm themselves or harm you. And you don't give them enough time to go through different intervals of being able to maneuver, pick up things, uh, break windows. All of these actions is taking place, especially if it's many against one, four against one. So this is a very touchy situation for me. So I'm listening attentively, and one of the most important thing that you said that resonates with me, it is the mentally stable person, which is the responders.
That's right. They should be. They should be. And it should be. And that's what responders, and you know what, a lot of times we have to understand responders are human. So this is another part of us as responders having it, being very aware of our lack of ability for the day. I may be a great responder, but I also have to pay attention to when my resources are down. If my resources are down today, this may not be the day for me to respond to stuff. And I think we do a bad job at that because, sometimes we have police officers and street workers go respond when their resources are down. If I'm having a tough time myself, I may have tough time making decisions. The decision making might not be best. I might make my decisions out of fight, flight, or freeze versus out of cognition, out of cognitive decision making. And so, therefore, when I recognize my resources, I might have to say this may be a time that I need to step back from the workload where we try to recognize. And this is why we often even tell police forces to try to as often as possible try to change people's duties on the job duties, where they're not doing the same thing, because then they take on the same mentality where you can give less stressful, if at all possible, give less stressful workload, as often as possible, because sometimes it's just the simple resource. You hear a lot of people say, "Oh, that was a really good person," or "They were a really good person. We were surprised they act like that." Well, that is often because they did not pay attention to their resources being down for the day. And those resources being down could be mental, physical, emotional, spiritual. Our resources can be down. Where a lot of times we don't understand. A lot of times we wake up and we have a loved one who's been lost. A lot of times we wake up and didn't know we was going to wake up with the stress of them on our shoulders for the day. And that's a day. That's a time to say, I need to take time out today. Those are those good mental health and personal holidays and mental health days where if you have a trauma-informed profession, a trauma-informed organization, they will say, who are open into listening to you, they can say, this just doesn't seem to be the day for you to go and teach a class of young people. If you're a police officer, this doesn't sound like the day for you to be the one responding to someone with a mental health breakdown, or going out on a response for domestic violence. Maybe you're not in the right place for that today.
I want to reiterate what you just said, because it resonates so much with me and some of the work that I've had a privilege of being a part of with people all over the city. And one of the things that I see that comes up a lot is that, when a crisis happens, or it may not be, I look at crisis as like a spectrum, right? So it might be a crisis where we need psychiatric support, we need licensed, clinical, culturally responsive and sensitive folks to be able to respond to these challenges or these moments in time. Or we can have our folks who are just lay people in the community who have some degree of training and knowledge and deep levels of empathy and compassion respond to other incidents at the opposite end of the crisis spectrum. Well, one of the things I want to pull out from what I got from what you said, brother, is that I think this is oftentimes it happens a lot, specifically within the Black community, is that we oftentimes feel the need to individually respond to every single crisis or every single thing that happens. So, right, if you got the healer or the practitioner or the neighbor who's always responding to these things in the community, and we're always tapping into them, at some point in time they are gonna be burnt out. They're gonna have challenges with empathizing and connecting. They're gonna have a short temper and a fuse and not be able to show up as their best selves in the moment. So there's I want to say a dual obligation there. One, for us as peers and family members and loved ones, to make sure that we're not just dumping people out and sending them in the line of fire or the call of duty whenever they're not prepared. And then ourselves too, being able to say, you know what, to ask ourselves those questions like, am I really prepared to go out and offer life-saving support, or even any kind of this peer support in this moment? Because it's like you say the word trauma and you point over there and Black people are running over there. Like, we got to go put out the fire. We got to go be, so sometimes it's like, sometimes the automatic response is to like chase the trauma. And I'm not saying that that's good or bad, but sometimes it's like, okay, maybe if we could be a little bit more reflective and say, do I need to go stand close to that fire right now? Then maybe let me keep a distance and feel some of the warmth from over here. So I do want to move us on to our next question. Great responses on that one, Ms. Danielle. I think this is your question too.
You must be really flowing, huh?
I tell you, what happens in the brain when it comes to depression, trauma, and fear? Beautiful things. You already answered that. You know,
Mhm.
you taught me a new word about freeze. You know, so you
Yeah,
kind of
sure,
already
sure.
covered that. So that should be real quick.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you talk about chemicals being released in the brain. The brain releases a lot of chemicals when it comes to trauma. I mean, to your top chemicals, you talk about cortisol and adrenaline. There's adrenaline coming from the adrenal gland, which sits above your kidneys, and that cortisol is a heavy chemical dump released from the brain, and the adrenaline helps push whatever that cortisol stress is. The adrenaline helps push the energy that you need to fight, flight, or freeze. So that's why I said fight, flight, or freeze. None of them are bad because you need the adrenaline to be released out the adrenal gland. If you're being chased by a bear, you need that adrenaline to be released, and so that there's a good thing when it comes to the autonomic nervous system and these chemicals being released to our body. When these chemicals are being released from our brain and our body, that means we are working well. We're not working, we are working. So again, that's why I said something has happened, not something's wrong with you. If someone's responding in a certain way, and a certain chemical is being released from their brain and body, that means their brain and body is working right. Brain and body is working the way the body and brain is supposed to work. So there's nothing wrong with them. There's something that happened to them. And so yeah, there's a number of chemicals, and some of these chemicals are released from our body, whether it's a euphoric a feeling or if it's a very, very traumatic or scary feeling. Some of these chemicals are the same, but the chemicals may be expressed differently depending on the event. And that's a major part of understanding the chemicals that are released from our brain and our body.
Mm. Thank you for that perspective. I want to pull out another piece. You're dropping gems. I just want to make sure we highlight them. This perspective that it's bad or someone is a bad person if they're trying to navigate the fear, the depression, and the trauma. It's not, that we wake up and we say, I'm just going to put on my coat of fear and my coat of trauma and depression today, and it's an intentional choice that we make because we want people to constantly see that. Sometimes, if not oftentimes, it's not a choice. It's something that happened to us, as you mentioned. So just always being mindful to meet people where they're at, and we can still hold people accountable. We can still ensure that people are doing their due diligence to support themselves and others. But just like brother said, keep in mind that you know it's about asking ourselves that question of what happened to this person, and what did they go through, what are they currently experiencing that is influencing them to show up in this way. So I just wanted to highlight that because that was a golden nugget for us. So
Yeah,
Miss
one thing, I'm sorry for interrupting, but one of the things I just wanted to highlight and give you kudos to, Brother Julius, is as I watch your interaction with Sister Danielle, and you asked her a question like of what's going on with her today, and creating that safe space where she knew she didn't have to just say, oh, I'm all right, I'm good, because that's our natural response. Hey, how are you doing today? I'm good. So we give an I'm good or I'm all right response. But I saw that Sister Danielle was able to say exactly what's going on with her today, that she knew that this was a safe place for me to do it. And oftentimes we don't provide safe places for people to do it. That safe space is about, I can be vulnerable before you. I know that I can say this to you because I'm going to get some genuine help from you. I'm not going to, I know I'm in a space of confidentiality and confidence in you. And so then I could really say what happened, what's going on with me. A lot of times we just say I'm good or I'm all right because we don't trust the person that we're talking to. So we just sum it up as I'm good. And then we let people go out in the streets like that and they are not good. And so they respond to trauma with trauma. And then that's just ugly, a very, very recipe for disaster, you know, which I think asking a question and me being able to sit back and watch it happen, I knew that I was like, okay, this seems like a very safe platform for this sister to answer this question. That was, she knew it was a confidential space, and it was a confident space for her to say, you know, be very vulnerable and very transparent in her answer to you. And that just, you know, personally, that just blessed me. I just wanted to make a point to that. That is real trauma. That's a real trauma informed approach to how we need to address everyone that way. And you know, for instance, if in fact you were in a position as a supervisor, you would say, well, I understand that my sister Danielle is dealing with some stuff, so maybe the high cases are not the best for her. Let's make sure that our sister is taken care of well before we put this on their shoulder, you know, or put that on their shoulder. So let me make sure that they're in a good place to be able to respond accordingly, instead of just throwing people out there in the streets, and then trauma is addressing trauma.
I think you just set us up perfectly to transition into this next question. You know, how can Black people use traumatic experiences as a tool to positively influence our thoughts, behaviors, and actions? You know, in thinking about this question, I really want to help us to start look at it, or encourage us to start looking at our trauma from an asset-based place. And I did mention this in pre-production with y'all. Just how do we start to do that? How do we start to use these experiences as a tool to positively influence the way we maneuver and navigate our daily lives?
Yeah, that's this is a question that just goes straight to education, understanding each other, understanding people's individual stories, understanding what happened to them. And when we hear an individual story, like if I ask you what's wrong with you, the normal response to what's wrong with you is nothing. And that's the response that's the universal normal response. Whether we ask that to our child, or we ask that to our spouse, or we ask that to a co-worker, what's wrong with you? The normal response is nothing. But if you ask someone what happened to you, then they begin to tell you a story about something happening to you. And from that story, you could pick up some things that could be triggers for them. And those triggers, we can start to educate individuals to say, hey, here's some triggers from your story. Here's some triggers you might want to pay attention to. Things that could trigger you, when we talk about trigger, these might be the things that take you over the top, or for me to pay attention to. So the education high education is very important for it. And that's what we are as therapists and counselors. We are to be educators first, you know. And, you know, just from lack of knowledge, we perish because we lack knowledge. And we even lack knowledge about ourselves. We may know our story, but we may not be educated about our story. You know?
Thank you for that, Miss Danielle.
That was Julius' question. Great question, Julius.
Well, it was a great question. Absolutely.
And I'll say too, even Miss Danielle, your spirit and your essence comes through in my question. Actually, I wanted to kind of go back to what brother was saying earlier. Like, I knew that I could ask Miss Danielle where she was, because I know she's made that space for me, you know. So it was like, I just felt that, you know, the reciprocity that we provide for each other, like, it was like, I knew that again, she would do the same thing for me. And she knew that I was genuine, you know, in my intentionality in asking, and not just for the sake of asking or just kind of going through the motions, that I really do want to know, you know what I mean, how you are in this moment, and if you need to lean on us, so to speak. So, but yeah, I guess the point I was trying to make, Miss Danielle, is like, you're in my questions. Your spirit is in my questions.
It can look, Belly, piggyback on that. This was when you said that, it was so ironic, because it was like a second thought. So when a relationship is comfortable to you, it's authentic. You don't have the safe place. Is like, it's not a second thought. You don't sit there and go, You don't have these inner conversations in your head. You know, Julius can ask me, and because I do feel safe, and because we have created this space for the both of us, it's no second thought. He asked, I'm gonna give him my most authentic response.
Sure. And that's an important. You both said something that's so important. Some very simple words: relationship, trust, confidence. Those are how we get to real conversations and real healing. We get on the journey of healing because you don't have to second guess it. Sometimes someone may ask you something, you may stop and say, I know them relationally, I know them, but I don't know if I have confidence in them, or I don't know if I have trust in them. We do that with police officers, pastors, therapists, all that. So relationship, confidence, trust, all of those things really matter, and so that's so important, and you can see that immediately, and you could probably reflect on some of the times you've had those same type of experience when people just spill their, very authentic, self out to you, and it's because there's confidence, there's relationship, and there's trust that's very well in that space, in that platform, for that platform for them. So that's a powerful piece.
Absolutely. Before I transition us to the next question, this reminds me of somebody posted something on social media the other day, and it says something. I'm paraphrasing. It was like, "Everyone is not your friend. We need to normalize referring to people as what they are, right? Like that's the male man or male person. That's the barber. That's the accountant, and not just describing them from what they do, but the point of, at least the way it resonated with me, the point of this post was, we don't have that trust and that level of intimacy with everyone that we think are our friends, maybe because we're friends on social media, or because maybe they did a nice thing for us. That doesn't mean that we can go to them with our innermost feelings and emotions and expect them to catch them or to hold space. And I've been guilty of that. I'm like, oh, we go way back, and then you go into that conversation and you're like, no, they're not hearing me. They're not feeling me. They didn't make sense. So being mindful of that too, of like who we go to in those moments of need when we're trying to get support, because that could just turn you off altogether. You're like, well, I went to my bro. I've known him for 10 years, and every time I talk to bro, he just keeps telling me to just be strong.
Be strong. Go pray about it. No, that's not working. That's not the answer. Absolutely not.
Cool. So can we move on to, I think, question number 5? How can Black people reframe our collective trauma narrative so that we reflect on it from an asset-based perspective? I think we kind of started to talk about this, but if you want to say more about that.
No, I think that's been talked about. When I look at that question, I think of the intergenerational trauma, how we pass down things intergenerationally through our lessons, how we teach our children, how our children teach their children ongoing, how we were taught ourselves. Some of the bad responses, or I'm trying to think the right language. I don't want to call it bad stuff, but some of the non-helpful things that we have done in the past in our family, of course, we have done within the Black community, is what happens here stays here. But sometimes we sit in trauma within our own family because we're leaving it like you don't talk about what happened at home outside your home. So then you have nowhere to release that energy. That energy and that trauma has to be sent somewhere. It has to be put somewhere, except for it. Then it has to stay within inside of us. And just the human responses, there's going to be an explosion or an implosion. So if we're holding something in the whole time, there's going to be an implosion. We're holding on to type of stress, and it turns to a toxic stress. The toxic stress goes through our bloodstream, and there's some sticky platelets that happen within our bloodstream. This is where there's this high blood pressure and heart disease and all those types of things happen within ourselves. A lot of times that comes from the internal stress that we're holding on, the internal trauma that we're holding on to ourselves, because we're not given permission giving each other permission to go to a place that is a safe place to understand our trauma, because we've been taught over the years, and don't, what happens here don't, stays. And rightfully so, that the reason why that message was passed down through our generations, because there wasn't a safe place to talk about our stuff, our in-home stuff. It was an exposure to people who were out to harm us, people who were intentionally out to use our lives against us, intentionally out to use our trauma against us. And it would be thrown back in ourselves, our own face. So we didn't speak of stuff outside of our home, you know. So we were made to be private all the time. Even with Africans who spoke different languages were not permitted to speak those languages in public. They were only permitted to speak English. They were not permitted to use their religious beliefs in public. They were only permitted to use the beliefs that was put upon them. And so we became very private people. We use that on every aspect, not knowing that there was a counterproductive impact on our lives.
So, Brother Darnell, do you see that narrative changing? Do you see specifically within the Black community, or is it changing when it comes to, man up? What we talk about at home stays at home. We don't want to go to therapy. Do you see the narratives around those beliefs or values or intergenerational things changing within the Black community?
I do see that. I do see that because of the growth of individuals, African American individuals, men and women, who are getting more and more involved in the education systems and the work, the day-to-day work as responders, as therapists and counselors. I do see the change in that there are people who come from that life, who are getting involved, who knows that the impact that that type of living has had on us. And so this educating our communities more, that Black males being in this space, living in this space, operating in this space, can pull on the hearts and the minds of other Black males. So that's an important thing, that when we begin to see people that look like us in spaces, we're willing to come here, come towards it, That's, so I think it's growing. It's slowly, but you're slowly growing, but it's growing nonetheless, So I see some changes in it.
I agree. I second that. So, and I think we need to, any chance we get, we need to speak out against these myths that Black people don't go to therapy, or Black people don't talk about the supports that they need. So I want to second everything you just mentioned, and begin approaching the end of the show. We got one more question. I want to make sure we get that in for you. So, final question: how can Black people use our individual trauma to inspire and uplift everyone who meets us? This is more at an individual level.
Yeah, again, understanding our trauma, understanding it, and one of the things that our sister Danielle talked about was her individual journey that has been, that she has approached, and understanding it from an individual perspective. And a lot of times we may say, hey, this is the journey I'm on, and reflecting back on a conversation she had, I believe, with her father. And sometimes we may say, this is the journey that I'm on, and people want to get on that same journey as you, but they don't get on it as you have gotten on it. Therefore, they may want to, we have to remember we're made of mind, body, and spirit. And if we want to have a great impact on our lives, we have to go in with the entire mind, body, and spirit. Oftentimes we'll go in things as an unbalanced, where we go in, we go without the mind, body, and spirit. We go in unbalanced or not whole, So it sounds like our sister Danielle has taken a holistic approach to this journey of what is it, the hunger strike. There's a holistic approach that you say, somebody might say, well, physically, I think you should stop doing it. But if your spirit is not okay with that, if your mind is not okay with that, then I can't, because they have to stay within the same space. So I might want to jump on that journey, because I want to jump on that journey, but I'm only jumping on it from a physical perspective, a body perspective, but I don't want to jump on it mentally or spiritually. Then you're not whole. And just going back to, my bottom line is going back to what Jesus often said to the individual. He said, "Your faith has made you whole." He wasn't talking about a person getting up walking or a person being able to see again. It wasn't about the physical aspect. It's about the holistic aspect that I'm putting my mind, my full mind, body, and spirit in this thing. So I can't just walk away because you want me to change what's happening to me physically, or you want me to change what's happening to me emotionally. Everything has to be in it. Everything about me has to be in it. So,
Darnell, give me a hug. You explained that so beautifully.
virtual hug, yeah.
It is a spiritual. You have to be in the same place, spiritually, mental, and physical.
That's right.
My physical body been wanting to eat a long time ago. That's what I'm trying to get. It wanted to do it. Like, I have to always have these conversations with all three. And anyone who knows me knows that at the end of the day, my spirituality and my faith is going to outweigh it all.
That's right.
And my faith and my why is going to be different from someone else's faith and why. But we have to be very careful when we start judging and criticizing, because we lack the knowledge to understand that person's path. Their shoes cannot be your shoes.
No, that's right. And you're so right. And so these individual journeys, a lot of times we hear someone say something, it's like, oh, I want to do that, but they only want to do that from a mental perspective or physical perspective. They don't want to do that as a whole, an entire person. So we get on journeys where we don't have our whole selves in the journey. And this is why we quit stuff. We take journeys, we take New Year's resolutions, but our entire being is not in that journey. This is why, I always tell individuals when we talk about taking a collective and a global approach to fasting in the church, or fasting in the entire body of the church. You have to know that everybody can fast. Everybody can do that fast. I think but some people, you might put out a global fast, and some people can't do that global fast physically. Some people can't do that emotionally. Some people can't do that mentally. And so we have to say, am I being made whole through my decision making? Am I doing it from a whole perspective, or am I doing it just from a partial perspective?
Can I say this one more? I'm sorry,
Sure,
Julie.
sure, please.
This is the biggest fight I have between my spiritual brothers and sisters and the path that I've chosen. I'm even willing to believe, even with my church, it's through lack of education. People would tell me all the time, what you're doing is not a fast. They would judge and say, God is not in it. God, when I tell you the ridicule from people of faith, and I'm looking at them and I'm saying to myself, I have a relationship with Christ. I didn't call this. I was called to it. And for you to judge it and say, that is not a fast. That is, what you're doing. God, I don't believe God would want you to kill yourself or not. I'm like, do you not remember? Jesus went in the desert for those who believe for 40 days without bread or water. No human has been able to survive 40 days without bread or water. But no one called him a suicidal mission.
Mm-hmm.
No one judged him and said, it's what you're doing, it is really harming yourself and it's selfish. I cannot, if I switch to water right now, I will not last. I promise you that. I will not last 40 days. Probably won't even last a week.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is just the lack of knowledge and education. So thank you. Thank you for even just touching on it.
That's
because
right.
This is the behind the scenes things that people don't see. But guess what? They're adding to my trauma.
Yeah, that's right.
Unknowingly.
And you got to be you got to have such a stance without wavering, such a stance and understanding. Your journey is your journey, no matter what other people think. No matter what other people, if they think you're crazy, whatever they think, it is still your journey, and you have to understand your journey. That you are going this from a mind, body, and spirit lens, through that entire perspective. Yeah, they may come at you with from a physical lens, but you're still there in a whole lens. And they're just coming at you in a partial lens. So stand. That's why the word says, "Stand firm, stand strong." In the word of God, if He give you a word, no one else's job to direct you from that word. Stand strong and firm in what He's told you to do.
And it's a word that's going to bring me out of this.
That's right. That's right.
Well, Brother Darnell and Sister Danielle, you got to pass the offering plate. I got to make an offering before we leave. No, I think it beautifully came full circle to connect mind, body, and spirit. And I think that's something that oftentimes doesn't get spoken about in our work. In our, I don't even know what to call it work, in our purpose-led, purpose-driven lives, that we live in this culture, this society, especially now. Everyone with the pandemic is spending way more time on social media than we ever have before. So, we have these perceptions of why people do things or how they should be doing things. I'm a firm believer, if your mind and your body and your spirit are moving in unison, if you are tapped in to something that's bigger than yourself, and you are not just being led or being driven by something that you can see or something that you can touch or that's right in front of you. If you have some, I don't think it is purposeful if some kind of spirit is not in it, right? If you don't have that spiritual energy and guidance in it. So I'm grateful that this conversation, we touched on a number of different perspectives, and I just hope, walking away from it, I'm sure people got some positive stuff out of it. Brother Darnell, we appreciate you and your time and your energy and your commitment to the community. Miss Danielle, you know how I feel about you, and we appreciate you as well. Any final thoughts from either of you before we say goodbye to folks?
No, I absolutely love the fact that you have given me this platform and this opportunity to share what God has given me to share, what experience and education has given me to share. And I look forward to sharing more, and I look forward to working with you all some more. Again, certainly people can look out for me in Facebook, Instagram. If you need to be in touch with me, I believe my phone number was shared as well. I'm at Center for Victims and with the Healing Rivers Project as well at Center for Victims. I'm also to be found over there at South Pittsburgh Coalition for Peace and Ministry. I'm associate minister. I'm on there. Again, like I said, I just do this because this is God's will, and that's all I want to do is His will. So thank you so much for this opportunity today.
Absolutely.
Darnell, we're gonna have you back on the show, I'm sure, soon enough. You are incredible. Matter of fact, you have comments here that says amazing, and that's exactly how I feel. I just want to shout out to some of our viewers today who have added, to this discussion, and we've been responding to them offline because we wanted to give you the platform because we knew you had spiritual food for us today, and we're grateful. We didn't want to interrupt that at all. And plus, we had enough questions ourselves. But Lee, thank you. Tara, thank you. Celeste, thank you. Sharon, thank you. Vanessa, thank you. Leela, thank you. Kim, thank you. Teresa, thank you.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you all.
All right. We appreciate y'all. We'll see y'all next week. Same time, same place.
Take care.
Peace.
Yes.